Good afternoon. This is the May 18, 2021 Harbor Management Commission meeting at 4:45. This is Kim Taylor. I am the chair of the commission. Due to COVID, we cannot have public comment, but anyone who is listening who would like their comments to be heard, please send an email to hmc@fairfieldct.org with today's meeting date in the subject line. Please include your name and address. Your email, your comments will be included in the minutes. We will not include your email address in those minutes. So this evening we have present are Mark Foster, Ted Schwartzman, Jack Hirschler, Sam Cargill, Doug Metchick, the Harbor Master Ed Billings, Consultant Jeff Stedman. Harry French will not be with us. Has Eric Sunman joined the call, or Libby Trischler?
Eric Sunman.
Oh, good, Eric. Super. Okay. Libby? No, Libby hopefully will join us. Betty Gabriel, have you been able to get through the traffic? Okay, I'm sure Betty will let us know when she's able to, when she gets to, is able to join us.
Kim, I'm here. It's Betty.
Wonderful, wonderful. Super, Betty. Thank you. So, Commissioners, this evening I'd like to change up the order of business just a little bit and move right into the Lower Wharf project. We have with us on the line Stephen Sternberg and Devin Santa from RACE, and they both have conflicts and will not be able to be with us for very long. But I think in view of our discussions about the Lower Wharf project, their presence and their comments and their ability to answer your questions are important. So hence my decision to move them to the forefront of our agenda this evening. Just by way of background, last month the RACE sent us a proposal outlining the scope of work and the costs associated with renewing the permit to complete the projects that we have been talking about and hoping to get done at the Lower Wharf. The proposal outlined, said that the scope of work would be investigating the site, doing the surveys, doing all the sediment sampling, preparing the permit applications, and the application follow-up. The cost was about $32,000, and Jeff Stedman and I met with Steve and Devin a week or so ago to discuss this proposal and the project in general. And at that meeting, Devin Santa pointed out some facts that I think are critical to our considerations about moving ahead, and it was because of his suggestion that we think again about the scope of the project and what we can accomplish and what we would like to accomplish, that I think it's important for us to have this conversation with Devin and Steve this evening. For example, one of the things that was pointed out, I did not realize this, and I'm sure most of you folks don't either, is that after all of our dredging, many of the boats at the dinghy dock would still be sitting on mud at low tide, that we can't do the dredging underneath all of the dinghy docks. So this proposal would include dredging, reconstructing the Lower Wharf, extending the boat ramp, and repairing the existing stone wall. And so that was the proposal that they came to us with last month. And as I say, then we had the conversation, and it begins to appear that we might not be able to complete all of the work that we would like to get done, and that the results of our project might not be what we had hoped it would be. So I know that there has been a lot of concern about our inability to get cap material, whether or not there are alternatives to the dredging. Jeff Stedman and I have talked very briefly with the rec department people to see if there's some chance that we can move the reconfigure the dinghy docks. But I'd like to open up the and Devin and Steve, if you have, why don't you start? If you have any suggestions or ideas about the kind of the existing project that may not work in this in this time and climate.
Sure. Thanks, Kim. This is Devin Santa. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Maybe if I may, I could take a few minutes with some background of the history of the projects, because there's multiple projects, and step through where we are here today. And I'll do it as rapidly as I can while still giving you all the color commentary of this, because this spans over the past decade and more. So essentially we had 5 elements of the Lower Wharf improvement projects. Some are in process, some have been abandoned, and some await action. And those are the ramp project, which is partially complete as it stands currently. Dredging, which has not been performed in any way, shape, or form as of yet, but is still being considered. A dock to support the town sailing program, which had been abandoned as an item of this improvement, and isn't currently considered, as I understand it. Repairs to the wall at the Lower Wharf, the stone wall, just pretty much maintenance repairs, and then reconstruction of the fishing pier, which had been permitted and designed but not executed. So of those 5 elements, probably the trickiest and most challenging of all has been the dredging. And I was looking back through my notes and the project history, and from basically August of 2010 through March of 2012, we went through 4 different revisions and renditions of the dredge footprint, each time the state taking a bite out of what they would have allowed. Our initial proposal was to dredge under the entirety of the dinghy docks to allow them to be floating and usable at all tides. Through the course of the regulatory review, they pushed back very aggressively on that dredging as it was considered in an intertidal flat. An intertidal flat is habitat much like a salt marsh would be considered. So they wouldn't allow us to dredge or impact that intertidal flat area, which is essentially extended under about half of the dinghy docks. So we're left with a fairly truncated dredging project that probably the most value it would provide would be the lower reaches of the boat ramp and maybe a channel to the boat ramp. But other than that, the area south of the dinghy docks was essentially deep enough as it was for its current usage, in the area that probably needed the most attention under the dinghy docks was not going to be addressed. That's where things ended with what we got authorized. So all 5 of those components, the ramp, the dredging, the sailing docks, the wall, the fishing pier, all got authorized, but the dredging was, the wings were clipped on that project, as I described. The dredging project kept going through advancement towards construction, as you all know, from getting funding from the Port Authority to allow this job to happen. But as that happened, some unfortunate coincident timing was also going on. And that's with respect to what's going on in Long Island Sound with ongoing litigation between New York State and the EPA that's really putting heightened scrutiny on dredging in Long Island Sound. And one of the elements that's really fallen under a lot of scrutiny is the practice of capping, where you put slightly impaired sediments under cleaner sediments. And that was a very common practice up to about 2 years ago, maybe 3. And to the point that Pequot Yacht Club's dredging was done the same way, where it was put under cleaner material, and that was acceptable, whatever that was, 8 or 9 years ago. So as capping became less prevalent, the ability to get capped material became non-existent. The project, we had a permit for it, but we couldn't execute on it. We reviewed alternatives of possibly taking it to western Long Island Sound, which had is another disposal site that had slightly higher contaminant levels, that we might be able to bring it there without capping. But to do that, they required new testing. When the new testing was done, the sediments were more impacted than they were with the testing that was done, I think, closing in on 15 years ago. So that door got shut for us as well. So we're back to proverbial square one. The permits lapsed for the dredging. The dredging that we believe that the state will authorize is fairly limited in scope, and even once authorized, we will have challenges with the relocation of the sediments due to the newly enforced guidance from the Army Corps on how they're viewing sediments for open water relocation. That takes us to present. The proposal you have in front of you is a proposal to advance that dredging project, but it's a dredging project that mirrors the last one in terms of limits, so it has some limited functionality, and we have reasonable reason to be cautious as far as how this material will test out and where it may be able to go. So with that, I think I can just open it up to Q&A if that works for you, Chairwoman.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions for Devin?
Devin, it's Jack. One question I would have is with respect to the installation of the boat ramp. My recollection is the ramp was installed but for the last piece, which is to go down at the base. Is it possible that the installation of that last piece could be done properly and the excavation work that's necessary to install that properly would not be considered dredging but just an installation of a ramp, but not fall under the approval process for doing the dredging? I'm just trying to figure out if that last piece of that project could be done as just an installation and not as a dredging project.
Yeah, Jack, I think you're exactly right. Most of the time we get involved in boat ramp projects, there is a certain amount of excavation, and we hesitate to call that dredging for fear of getting it misinterpreted. But yeah, there is some amount, and yeah, you're right. The last plank would need to be installed, and also the grade on the last 1 or 2 planks that are currently installed are not to design grades, so they would need to be picked up and some soil excavated out from beneath them to have them pitch more.
So what in your professional opinion is the approval process to accomplish that last piece of the almost completed?
Well, that we can do from a certificate of permission process, because that permit has also expired. So it should be, I believe it should be fairly straightforward to get that authorized. We still would have to manage the material that would come up, and that wouldn't be hundreds or thousands of yards. It would be 5 or 10 yards, I'd imagine. Just pulling a number out of the air. I don't know exactly right now.
Right.
And that material probably would have to go up into the parking area at the boat ramp site, de-watered and trucked out of there.
Okay.
And handled just like any construction excavation. Still would need to be tested, and where its end destination would be dependent on its characteristics.
So we would have a certificate of permission, if approved, that would allow us to do what you just described, and we would end up with the finished boat ramp as pretty much as planned.
Yeah. With the recognition that the bottom elevation of that last plank is going to be basically lower than current grade.
Yeah.
Which it's not useless per se, because you need draft or depth of your boat ramp for your trailer to get your boat to float off.
Right.
So even if the grade of
a little
the natural
steeper
grade,
than we would have expected, is what you're saying.
Yeah, but basically, even if your boat ramp is in a depression and grade comes up around it, it's still not useless.
Yeah. Because
your boat can float in less water than it takes to get your boat on and off its trailer. I don't know if I'm being 100% clear on that, but
yeah.
Kim, this is Jeff. Could I
go ahead, Jeff?
Make a comment?
Yep.
I guess one of our basic questions is, with the money that we have for the project, how much can we accomplish, and could we with the money that's currently available do the dredging project as previously proposed? So Ted gave a report last month, I believe, that we obtained $277,000 from the Connecticut Port Authority. And Ted can correct me if I'm wrong about the amount that so far has been spent out of that was $10,000. So that leaves $267,000, and the original allocation from the town was $150,000. And that of that amount, we've spent a good bit on that we use that to purchase the boat ramp planks and the equipment that DPW used to install the boat ramp. So there's about $30,000 left in that account. And I think that brings us to about $297,000 or thereabouts that's remaining for the project. With respect to dewatering the material at the town boatyard, we we talked with Mr. Cathcart, the DPW marina supervisor, and that's not going to be a really straightforward or simple thing to get approval for, perhaps. He said that they proposed something recently there, and they needed to go through the Historic District Commission to get approval. And then there's also the issue of the current situation in town with the issue with the contaminated material that's been the subject of the legal actions. So yes, I think it would be perhaps a good idea to think if we could repurpose it and at least get the boat ramp finished correctly. But there may be some hurdles to be able to dewater the material at the town boatyard, and but I just bring that up for information purposes.
I think that's well said, and I think that the hurdles are not necessarily known, and I think what would dictate those hurdles is probably the quality of that sediment. If the sediment in the vicinity of the ramp tests out as clean, it's probably not as potentially controversial as if it had contaminant levels in it. And I think this is almost pure optics more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. And when we started this project, the real purpose of it wasn't to, as I recall, to improve the situation around the dinghy docks, but it was to enable construction of the community sailing dock off of the lower wharf. So it was the ramp and that facility, and then what we, as you said, when we had to survey the lowest predicted tide, that further directed us away from doing anything at the dinghy docks, because that moved the lowest predicted tide moved that line farther away from the shoreline, and as you said, Devin, limited the area that we could dredge. And then subsequently, we removed the community sailing dock from the project, and I think I think you did some borings in that area and found ledge, and that was going to be a big expense to try to drive piles in that area.
Yeah, and I think there was opposition to the existence of piles, regardless of their cost for installation.
Yeah, that was
per my recollection.
The original design had pilings along the boat launching ramp to improve, to have a floating dock along the side of the ramp. Yep. And the neighbors objected to that, but they couldn't object to the community sailing dock because that's provided for in the deed to the Lower Wharf property. But that's, I guess, a moot point now.
So, yeah, I think the question in front of the commission is this kind of partial truncated dredging project a worthwhile project, or is that money better used to fashion another kind of project modification? And just knowing the site as I know the site, knowing the area as I know the area, one of the things that would jump out in my head is, get the boat ramp done, regrade it, get that last plank in, and make that as operational as possible. The other, and this was one of the ideas that Steve was kicking around in our call we had with the chairwoman and Jeff, was to reorient the docks to try and put them in deeper water, and maybe kind of just back of the envelope sketch some things that might better accommodate the dinghies that are there to let them come and go under more tides. Because if we move south, we get into more water, or if we move east, we get into more water. South may be a problem because we have perhaps repairing right matters, but east may be more straightforward.
We talked about.
Go ahead,
I interrupted again. Sorry.
Please go ahead.
We talked about that with Mr. Cathcart, and Kim, I believe, also talked about that with the director of Parks and Rec.
Right.
And so that in part is going to be up to whether they think that that's going to be of benefit to them, because they manage those. They're the managers of those docks. And when we first discussed it, Justin didn't think that would provide them a significant benefit, but he was going to discuss that some more. I think
it might be worth just kind of drawing it out on paper and seeing what it does look like.
To discuss with them, yes, because it's going to be up to them as to whether they want to pursue that.
And so
sorry to
Devin,
interrupt this.
This
is
go ahead,
Ed Billings.
Ed, go ahead.
A question for Devin. I mean, in the preliminary discussions, was there any specifics as to how far out to move the floats in one direction or another direction to provide, more adequate access for the dinghies and maybe subsequently additional moorings too? Just curious about the orientation, basically.
Sorry, the question is whether we thought about moving the docks further south at the time we were talking about dredging?
Yeah, I mean, is there any orientation change, or I just heard a little bit about changing?
No, we hadn't done anything prior. We hadn't moved the docks at all, and just sought to dredge under them as best we could. I think the question at hand is, would reconsideration of trying to reorient something that could maybe have a few more usable spaces be worthwhile.
But that discussion hasn't taken place yet.
Correct. Not any more than just whatever Jeff just mentioned, the kind of big picture of not looking at any particular plan, but discussing it in concept with Justin.
Right. I was just curious. Does that have any effect on the? Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, sorry.
Devin, I don't have the diagram in my head clear enough in that area of the harbor. Where does the Federal Navigation Project end going east? I mean, where's the eastern boundary?
It's
the western boundary of the Federal Navigation Project.
It's a little pie-shaped in that region. It kind of angles. It's almost like closest at the furthest south extent of the dinghy docks, and then it turns off to the east and gains some distance. So there's a kind of little like triangular swath of area there that may be
deeper water, but not in the Federal Navigation Project. Is what you're saying?
Oh yeah, correct. We're clearly bounded by the limits of the federal channel.
Yeah, just trying to remember where that started. Okay.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we're not able to be sitting around and either on Zoom with graphics or around the conference table with a big board that we could point this out. But yeah, there's a little area, but not enough to make a marina. It just might be enough to get us a few more spaces that would otherwise be impacted by grounding.
That feels like that's the kind of the core issue here is this is really what Justin was saying, what are we really benefiting, to what extent are we benefiting for the effort here?
Right, and again, that's where I think some effort to just sketch things up, and you guys can do it, we can help out on it, but just, is there something that could improve the number of boats that are there without becoming an issue, either a fight for riparian rights to the south or impinging too close to the navigation project to the east?
Was it your guys' sense that the Parks and Rec Department has an appetite to even investigate it, or they just don't really want to pursue this? I wasn't clear from your summary of your conversation with Parks and Rec.
I'll let Jeff handle that. He had the conversation.
Justin
this is Kim. I chatted with the director of Parks and Rec, and I made it clear that we hadn't decided on any specific course of action. But if we were able to come up with a plan that gave more boats fuller access at all tides, without getting into the channel, he thought that would be an interesting idea to pursue.
Good.
It was a very high level, very big picture kind of conversation. Nothing about details and how many boats or any of that kind of thing. Devin,
Kim, this is Ted.
Oh, Ted, go ahead, please.
And I think this is probably more for you than it is for anyone else, but and I don't know the answer to this, but I would have to think that if we go and change the scope of this project, you would probably have to go back to the Connecticut Port Authority and their SHIP grant and get approval from them to change the scope. I don't think we could just do that unilaterally.
Actually, that's a question for Jeff, I think. Didn't you talk to folks at the Port Authority, Jeff?
Yes, and they didn't say that we couldn't do it, but as Ted said, we need to discuss it with them and
right.
properly get permission to do that.
Right.
Especially since the Port Authority is being, what's the term, audited and looked at very carefully as to how they've allocated money in the past. So yeah, it's not something that we couldn't do, but we as Ted said, we have to seek permission.
Right.
Because the money was allocated by the Connecticut Bond Commission for a dredging project.
Right.
But I think we could make a good argument. It was all part of it's one big project with multiple components to it, and if we scale back one, but we still have to go through that effort as Ted suggested
right.
recognized.
The one big project with multiple components, I have a question for Devin on that. He mentioned 5 different components at the beginning of the discussion, and Jack followed up to talk about whether the boat ramp could be done independent. I'm just wondering about the wall that needs to be reconstructed at Lower Wharf as well as the fishing pier. Could they also be unbundled, and be worked on independent from the dredging aspect of this project?
Yeah, very, very easily. The wall, I mean, there's nothing dramatically wrong with the wall. It was more just a chinking and repointing exercise. That can be done as of right, provided you're not using heavy equipment or doing excavation to make those repairs. So that's pretty straightforward. And the pier itself, should be able to be handled easily through a certificate of permission. So those every other piece of this project is fairly straightforward from a regulatory perspective, except the dredging.
So, Devin, this is Kim. Going forward, if we were to, do we need to go to DEEP to get permission to fix the wall and to fix the wharf?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the wall, depending on how it's fixed, if it's just handwork, could be as of right. The timber pier, it's possible, depending on how. It's either going to be pretty straightforward through certificate of permission, or it may be able to be done through a general permit. That would be easier still, but it depends on the extent of it. So we had some renditions that involved reconstruction to the north, where the derelict piles are now. I think when we finally came up with bid documents for it, we had it kind of with or without that extension, and that would dictate a little bit of the regulatory. We might be able to do it through a general permit if we didn't repair that northern part.
So
you put together, Devin, a cost estimate for that several years ago. And so you had two. Well, anyway, we have that cost estimate. It's still the work on the pier, both the south portion and the north, is there's still a substantial cost for that. The two of them together were estimated to cost more than the dredging project back at that time.
Wow.
And I think I have to look back at that too, Jeff, because I think some of it was ranged based on whether piles can be drilled or driven.
Yeah.
And I think as you moved to the north, you had shallower and shallower rock ledge. So I think it was easier to construct it to the south. So I'd really have to go back, and I'm sure I have all the notes on this.
Right.
But it would be pretty stale anyway, that pricing.
Right. But again, you have all the components. You went through that exercise 3 years ago, so we could go through it again. You have your
exactly.
notes and stuff. Yeah.
Okay. And on the dredging for the boat ramp, Devin, the two alternatives are dumping what we pull out of the pull out is dumping it and dewatering it. There's nothing else.
No, you're going to have to excavate. You're going to have some amount of material you're going to have to get rid of.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to side cast it and just put it on the mud flat.
Yeah.
So I think it's letting it dry out and trucking it away. I mean, in a different time, in a different, not with the scrutiny that impacted sediments are having right now in this town, and not in such a residential neighborhood, this wouldn't be a problem at all. Yeah. It's really not that big a deal in terms of material or in terms of handling it. It's a couple triaxles. But it's just the current circumstances certainly would need to be weighed in any decision how to proceed.
And as I recall, you said in our meeting that there are lots of other projects up and down the Sound that are looking for cap material.
Yes.
So even if we were
getting cap material is pretty competitive right now, and right now New York State is pretty much in opposition to the practice of capping. So the permit that we had that was issued, whatever it was, about 10 years ago, there's certainly no guarantee that they would issue it the same way. They might not allow capping, and if they don't allow capping and they don't allow it to Western, then that takes the whole thing to going upland to all the dredging project, not just the excavation for the ramp.
Yeah.
Devin, is there any, I think I had asked Jeff in a previous meeting, but you weren't able to participate. Now I've got you, so let me ask the question. Is there any dumping of material like we have that needs capping that could be done in the ocean in any place?
Oh, that's what I'm referring to, Jack. There's right now there's three open water relocation sites in Long Island Sound. One off the Norfolk Islands, one off New Haven, and one near New London.
No, I was talking about outside beyond Montauk Point in the ocean.
They're all managed sites, so
okay.
No, you couldn't just take this stuff and dump it in the ocean.
Okay.
Rhode Island has an open water site that's somewhere near Block Island, but you'd have to apply to Rhode Island's government to take it there. And then there's one south of New York, New Jersey. But you're on to an entirely different project. And at that point, I bet it would be cheaper to take the material, bring it to New Haven Harbor, offload it, and take it to a landfill.
Okay. So really, they're just the two options that Kim outlined.
Well, yeah, those are the really primarily viable ones, or taking it upland.
Yep.
And again, if you have a small enough project, even if it's this the excavation necessary for the boat ramp, and you're only dealing with 10 yards, the unit cost of that material is not going to make or break a job. If you're dealing with 1,000 or 2,000 yards, all of a sudden that unit price really drives what's viable.
Right, got it.
So, Devin, does it make sense? In the past, this has all been bundled as one permit that went to deep, but so we're saying that to do something at the lower wharf would be a COP, and that maybe a general permit at the wharf to do the work at the wharf and the dock. So those are two different.
We can look at the specifics, but just generally speaking, permitting is going to be pretty straightforward on everything but the dredging.
Okay. Okay. And when we talk about the dredging, we're talking about any kind of excavation to get the material at the end of the boat ramp, away from the boat ramp.
Yeah, just I would say dredging is not talking about the stuff that's under the boat ramp that would need to be regraded.
Right. But the stuff at the end, so we could get that last piece in.
Yeah. I wouldn't consider that dredging, but the distinction is kind of in name only. You could dredge and dewater and take the material upland. Here we're saying, we would just dewater and take that material upland.
Yep. Okay.
It feels to me like we should chunk it up like you're describing, and we should do the work to draw a diagram to understand what the cost-benefit of reconfiguring the dinghy docks could look like, and then we'll have more information to make a decision whether that makes sense. And the other pieces are just going to be driven by what we can afford and balance the cost and the budget we've got for which pieces we can do.
Right, and whether the Port Authority would allow us to divert some of the money from the dredging project to.
Right. I mean, these were all components of the project they previously approved, so we're just reconfiguring the money for things that we can get permits for. So.
Right.
So, folks,
this
is Mark.
Kevin?
Can I?
Go ahead, Mark. Yeah, please.
Yeah, just for what it's worth. I while we were talking, I pulled up the previous site plan, and just since although we're not sharing screens, I've always wanted to say this. Imagine, if you will. I say I've always held that in reserve in case I ever do a presentation where everything just goes up in smoke, and I have to say that. So, but I'm looking at it. It looks like I'm looking at the contours, and so when you walk down imagine if you walk down the aluminum gangway and come to the end of the gangway at low tide, that's about where the water's edge will be. That's elevation 0 compared to, looks like this datum is mean low water. And then if you walk out straight ahead, walk to the end of that finger, the water depth will be 2 feet deep. And then, but if you instead go back to the end of the gangway and turn left, walk straight ahead, turn right, and go down to the end of that other finger, the 2 fingers, right? Walk to the end of the further east finger, and get to the end. The water depth will be 1, 2, only 2, 3, 4 feet, pushing 5 at the very end of it. But halfway out that finger, it's only 2 feet. So I guess I'm saying it's elevation -2 at the end of the western finger and about the middle of the eastern finger. So to me, I would describe what I'm seeing as the mud line is pretty flat between the end of the gangway and out to the end of the western pier, and most of the way out on the eastern pier. So if you want to get some significant depth, you'd have to make some significant movement in the docks to get you to where the drop-off is. The drop-off is, towards the channel, of course. But right now, the end of that eastern finger is about 16 feet away, measuring in PDF, but it's pretty close. The drawing's to scale, but I get 16 feet anyway from the Federal Channel line, which just is not a lot because the size of the boats, the footprint of the boats that are stored there will matter to the agencies when they review something.
Right.
So I guess what I'm saying is, I'm looking at the drawing and trying to think of what a back of the napkin, brainstorm would be, and I'm short for one. So yeah. I guess I would say the next step would be that back of the napkin, but I don't see anything myself looking at the drawing here right now that I can recommend.
I'd agree. There's nothing super apparent. I mean, extending everything further south really helps because we're not really getting closer to the channel and getting into deeper water. But I think we're going to get opposition to that. That little sliver to the east is not much to work with, but it's something to work with. Rather than having a U-shaped dock, could we make an L-shaped dock out in the deeper water so people can come onto both sides? I don't know. I don't. Mm-hmm. There's nothing that jumps out at me right away. Here's an awesome solution. It could be a situation where we can reduce the number of overall boats, but have more of them floating. And then what's that judgment call? Is that better or worse?
So I'm thinking. Let's say that it was a given that you wanted to make a change for whatever reason. You're asked to do this. You got to do it. Once you're done making a change, you wouldn't necessarily want to broadcast widely to the community and proudly that you made a change because it would be so small. That's what I'm thinking. You might be able to eke out something that you could say is an improvement, but it won't be impressive. Is my feeling. So Another observation is if you were to walk straight out from that western pier to get 1 extra foot deeper, you'd have to progress another 34 feet or so. I'm measuring maybe 35 feet straight ahead to get that extra foot. So it's very, very flat.
Yeah, and some is not even just getting deeper, but just getting into water that's deep. So even if it's just as shallow as the boats that are floating, you're still better off than the dock that's sitting on the mud. But yeah, I don't disagree at all. Everything that we would be able to do would be modest improvements, and likely coming at the expense of overall boat count, but just having boats that can float more regularly.
And for what it's worth, just a comment is I use the ramp to launch my Mako 20. I'm not there all the time, so I'm interested as to what other people what other people have seen or what people are saying. For me, and of course I'm a local guy, so if the tide is dead low, it's annoying, but I can tie up and go to the spick and span and get a sandwich and come back, and then I have enough water. So it's not a big deal for me. But also when I launch, I'm pretty squeamish about putting in my bearings into the salt water when I don't have to. So I usually just let it rip and let the boat slide down the rollers into the water with only my tires and the axle clear. So for me, enough water to float the boat is the same thing as enough water for the trail. In other words, it's not the scenario you described, which most everybody else does, which is getting backing the trailer into the water to the point that the boat floats. I seldom do that when I launch, and I sometimes don't even do it when I haul because I can crank it up. It's a lot of work, but I can crank the boat up with a crank without getting the axle into the water if I want. So if you were just asking me as a user if it's worth the project you were describing, I would say no, because what I really need is enough draft after I launch or before I haul, so that I can just tie up and use the dock to load my gear up and so forth. But I'm interested in what we're getting from other people. And again, I'm not sure that there are bigger boats than I who are using the gangways. The launch ramp. So I'd ask, do we feel that there are boats 20 feet and up that are using that ramp a lot? Because I'm thinking the boats my size and smaller don't care that much about a little hollow right at the toe of that launch ramp. Certainly kayaks, they don't care. It's not going to do anything for them. So I wonder if anybody can add to that, whether we know what people are saying or whether we have personal accounts or views as to the value of that scenario.
Well, this is Kim, Mark. We had in our survey, we had maybe one, maybe two, certainly one fellow who said that he wanted the boat ramp to be deeper, that longer and deeper, that was a problem for him. But of the 300 plus, almost 400 people who responded, we only had one or two. So I don't know how much of a problem it is.
Right. Okay.
Are there
I guess my overall sentiment is that we should pursue the longer term, if it has to be, project for a dredging project, a lot like what was originally envisioned.
Yeah, and that's the proposal you have in front of you. So we're ready, willing, and able to take that on. Just making sure everyone understands the hurdles. So I'm sorry, but I have to jump.
Okay.
Now, is there any other questions before I go?
Commissioners, any more questions for Devin? Devin, thank you, and we will get back to you.
Okay. You guys have my number. Appreciate the opportunity, and hope to work together to get something that works here for everyone. So thank you.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Devin.
Thanks, Devin.
So I would have asked whether we commissioners can have a copy of the lab results for the mud. I wonder whether Jeffrey's got that.
Does Jeff have that? Jeff, do you have that?
I'm pretty sure I do. I mean,
okay.
Take me, but those the most recent. Well, not to prolong the discussion, but yes, Race took samples recently in an effort to try to get deep in the core to agree to use the Western Long Island Sound site. So I have those. I'm sure that they provided those to us.
The reason I ask, I'm not a chemist, but it just that when we talk about whether there'll be any pushback from the users of the site for dewatering on shore, it just would make sense that we all know what the nature of the contamination is. That's part of it. If it's smelly stuff is really what I want to know. I can ask one of my chemist friends.
The original samples were taken a number of years ago, so we took not a full set. Race did, as I said, to try to get agreement to use the Western Long Island Sound disposal site, and the Corps we asked them for an informal review, and they found that the material was worse than it was based on from the original samples years ago. Now that may be because there's just different, more strict testing requirements. I don't know, but in any event, as part of this new permit, we would have to retest everything. And that's a substantial cost that's built into Race's proposal. So we still have to go through a more detailed testing regimen to get this new permit. But I'll get the stuff that we have, Mark. I mean, I know I have it someplace.
Any other questions?
And Kim, Devin referred to a proposal a couple times.
Right, and
saying that the proposal.
I was just about to say, Ted, that Devin sent Jeff and I the proposal, which I will forward on to all the commissioners. I'll do that right after the meeting. I didn't want to. I wanted our conversation today to be more about the bigger picture and whether there were other ideas that we should be pursuing, or I didn't want us to just be focusing on the proposal because the other ideas, the dewatering and stuff, are not included in the proposal. But yeah, I will do that, and I apologize. I should have thought of that sooner. But I will do that right after when the meeting is over. I will send everybody that proposal from Race.
Okay. And just to chip in with my 2 cents on this, Kim, I think I would be very much in favor of trying to take care of and complete what we can take care of and complete. So in other words, if we can separate the boat ramp and perhaps do whatever work we need to do on the lower wharf wall and take care of those things, assuming that the commission agrees that they're still priorities, I would be in favor of viewing those separately, because it really sounds like the dredging is a project into and of itself, which has a lot of factors that are aligned against it and will hold everything else up that we attach to it.
Right, and the one thing that Devin didn't mention, and that we chatted about briefly in our meeting, the meeting that Jeff and I had with the Race folks, was that it's 22-23 dredging season is what we're looking at the earliest to get the work done. Given the time that it takes to get the permit and to identify contractors, et cetera, et cetera. So, if there's something, I agree with you. If there's something we can do sooner, it might be a good idea to act on what we can do rather than waiting and hoping that, waiting 2 years and then hoping that we get some cap material. So, okay. So I will send out that proposal to everybody this evening, and we can have another discussion, follow-up discussion at our June meeting. Unless there are any other comments on the Lower Wharf project or what we've just been chatting about. Okay, so let's get back to the agenda. Betty has embedded the minutes. I need a motion to approve them as they have been presented.
So moved.
Okay, Mark moves. Can I have a second? Second on approving the minutes.
Second, Sam.
Sam, great.
Yep.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, all in favor. Great. Okay, moving right along. My report, the email from April 20th was from Steve Sternberg was sending the proposal that I will forward to you guys this evening. I emailed Attorney John Casey on the 21st, informing him of our finding with respect to his request that we suggest to the harbor master that he give Mr. Owens a permit, and that his harbor master's inquiries about the ownership of 789 Harbor Road were inappropriate. On the 26th and on the 27th, I believe the next day, I didn't include the date here, Janice DeShays, the deep hearing officer in the Aquarian matter, we requested that she postpone the comment period on the Aquarian matter from the 15th to the 21st, and she said that she would not extend the public comment period for everyone, but she would extend the public comment period for the commission, and we will discuss later in the agenda exactly what happened with the public hearing and the evidentiary hearing on May 4 and May 6. And finally, we received a new application from 50 Bay Edge Court, which is out of our jurisdiction, but nonetheless, the folks are required to submit it because Fairfield has a Harbor Management Commission. So, moving right along, sand management, Jeff and Mark, anything to report?
I don't want to interrupt if Mark was going to say something, but we were hoping to have a meeting with the Corps of Engineers, a Zoom meeting prior to an on-site meeting. Mark was away on vacation, and then since then we're trying to reschedule it, and I'm significantly hoping that Zoom meeting with Mark, myself, and Kim, and representatives of the Corps of Engineers will take place next week. That's what we're trying to schedule now. It would be a Zoom meeting to go over several questions and discussions or questions that the Corps has, and then we would have an on-site meeting. So another month has passed. We haven't met with the Corps other than talk with them on the phone, but we're trying to schedule that meeting, and hopefully it will be next week.
Mark, any?
No, thank you, Jeff.
Any questions from commissioners? Okay, Mooring Committee, Jack.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry. The mooring committee met on May 12th, and at that meeting, Ed reported that he was still awaiting some complete information for a couple of the pending permit applications, and had recently received a report that a fisherman had dropped fishing gear in the Federal Navigation Channel. He ended up speaking with the fisherman and requested that he move the gear to a location clear of the channel, and that apparently did occur. He finally reported that boats were arriving slowly into the harbor for the 2021 boating season. At that meeting, I reported that, Kim, you had let me know that the proposal to the town to accept the donated Harbor Master Patrol vessel from Pequot Yacht Club was still under review, and my understanding is as of today it still is under review by the town. Ed is keeping a boatyard that has a trailer that would be suitable for that boat on the line, hoping that we get the boat approval and then he can follow through with the budgeted purchase of that boat trailer for the donated Harbor Master boat. The status of the pending priority mooring permit submitted by Tom Owens was briefly discussed at our mooring committee meeting, and Harbor Master Billings at that time was working on his response to Mr. Owens' FOIA information request and a letter responding to Mr. Owens regarding his priority mooring permit application was being prepared at that time. And then finally, Justin Cathcart from the Parks and Recreation Department had indicated to me on May 5th, I reported that he said that the HMC's invoice for the 2021 mooring tackle fees that are paid by the Parks and Recreation Department and deposited to the Harbor Management 102 account had been submitted to the Finance Department. And I don't know, Betty, perhaps you know if that has been completed yet or if it's still pending. I'm not sure. And then Ed will be updating the online mooring system once that's done to give credit for payment of those mooring tackle fees in the online mooring system. That's the report of the mooring committee from May 12th.
Any questions, commissioners, about the mooring committee meeting? Betty, do you know the status of that invoice?
Kim, I can check that tomorrow.
Oh, Betty, you're super. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Kim, it's Ted. I have a couple questions, although I think they may be more appropriate for the Harbor Master than they are for the mooring committee.
Okay. Well, I was just about to apologize to the Harbor Master that I hadn't given him an opportunity to report. I skipped right over it, looking right at it. So should we let him report, and then Ted, then you can ask the questions? Maybe he'll cover in his report.
That sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Ed, I apologize. I'm looking right at it and just didn't say Harbor Master report.
No, that's quite all right because normally I think I shortchange Mr. Hirschler on his report because he and I really don't compare notes as to what we're going to be reporting. So, I think a turnabout is fair play in this case.
Definitely.
In any event, regarding the boater or the fisherman who set fishing gear in the channel, it was interesting just to be able to go to deep and find out exactly who is, who has the authority, and how we identify those commercial fishermen who, he inadvertently did it, and I told him, please, if you do it again, set his gear, make sure it's at least 50 to 100 feet outside of the channel, which he agreed that he would do. But in any event, no need to apologize to me ever. Let's see. Okay, so where are we? One thing, I was at the harbor today, and one thing is kind of interesting. There's not a heck of a lot of boats there yet, but granted, it's still early in the season, and we really don't get into the full swing until around the 1st of June, Memorial Day. So, but with the beautiful weather this week, it was good to see a number of people down there and more boats coming in nearly every day. As Jack reported, the letter to Mr. Owens regarding his priority status application for a mooring, I sent out a letter to him and his attorney, and the update on that is that I decided to disallow that priority status and invited him to remain on the current wait list, as many others have, and some others have who have truly riparian rights. And as an update to that, the FOIA request is still being worked on. I was happy to receive a document from Online Mooring. They do have a spreadsheet that I believe will be pretty helpful to Mr. Casey in his endeavor, and we will be going through some of the papers for past applications as well. Just as an aside, I'd like to continue to thank the guys at Pequot Yacht Club. Travis Herman in particular this time, because he was very willing to go out and untangle a mooring to a relatively new boater in the South Anchorage, which the boater was quite appreciative of. He sent both Travis and myself a thank you letter for accommodating him and doing prompt follow-up. Online Mooring, we continue to process some applications. Granted, it's slowing down quite a bit, but there's still a number of people who, as of yet, have not sent in their proper documentation. But we're closing that up. So I believe it looks pretty good. So overall, I'd say we're at, if we're going to grade ourselves, maybe a B level right now. So, and with that, I'll conclude my report. Pending questions.
Ted?
I have a couple questions for the Harbor Master. First one is, I'm just curious how many folks we have on the wait list at this point. And then secondly, I was curious how the process worked with Online Mooring this go-around.
We have 65 people on the wait list currently. How it worked this time around? I would say quite a bit better than last year, Ted. There's still some glitches, and I think that the biggest problem that I noted this year, and was kind of a continuation of the same problem last year, is that our online system is a hybrid. It's not like anybody else's. It's with our waitlist procedure. Some of the rules that we have to go through. Most of the other providers that use Online Mooring don't have that. They don't have priority status for what we were just talking about, for riparian littoral right people. They don't necessarily have a big wait list where you can, if you're successful in asserting that, then you can jump ahead of many people. Same thing with if you're a commercial fisherman. These are all just little different attributes that our system has. Does that plus we have as you can see, if you look at the Online Mooring, we have 3 different mooring areas, and so it's nice to be able to have that information, but myself, I'm not quite sure how to describe it. It's it's trying to get everyone on board, so to speak, to give me that information, whether you're a docked vessel, which, there's no fee for that. If you're in the North Anchorage, if you're in the South Anchorage, if you're on Perry Green. But all in all, I would say it is better than last year. It was just we just came across some different issues this year, which seemed to be a little bit irritating and quite time consuming. Did that answer your question successfully, or are you going to give me a beat too?
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question for the Harbor Master? I would just note here that I believe all of you got a copy of the annual report, and Ed has agreed to send it out to everyone who is a mooring holder, or the link to it via the online mooring system. So we're very grateful for that, Ed. It's a great way to get everybody get the report in front of everybody. Proposed changes. Harbor Management Plan update. Our committee met on the 29th. We reviewed the first part of Chapter 6 and talked about what kinds of recommendations had been achieved, what we wanted to keep, and what needed to be added going forward. This part of the plan is where we have where it mentions that the harbor is open to all. This is where we talk about the MOA. This is where we're going to add information about the sand management plan. Unlike the other chapters that we have reviewed for updating, this one was these sections lent themselves not so much to specific changing specific language as it did to making sure that we were incorporating specific ideas. That was pretty much what the substance of our meeting was, just chatting about the ideas that were in the plan, and Jeff will follow up with the drafting exercise. So we're going to meet again in a couple of weeks, the end of May, and hopefully continue to work on the revisions to the second part of Chapter 6. So any questions? Okay. Anyone who would like to come to that meeting is more than welcome. Please just let me know if you're interested. Moving forward to number 5, proposed changes to the rules and procedures. Jack? Jack?
I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to unmute myself and start talking, and nobody's listening. So
it's not
natural. I think I'm back on again. I wanted to report that prior to our meeting this month, Betty distributed, again, the updated rules and procedures. The version that we have, as prepared by Jeff, show in yellow all the changes that were made subsequent to the public hearing back in December of last year. And at our meeting in April, we wanted to give people a whole month additionally to look at those and to be prepared to discuss any concerns or questions people had at today's meeting. And you'll recall prior to last month's meeting, Betty also circulated the related fee table, which had no changes from the one that we presented last December at the public hearing. and also the proposed changes to be presented to the RTM once we've approved them to the town code, so that we would be certain that the harbor management plan and the rules and procedures and the town code all line up properly. The only change since December to the town code was a clarification. This came up in a meeting, I think in March, that, or perhaps the April one, I can't remember, that we should use exactly the same language fully that's in a footnote in the rules and procedures to describe what a mooring float is, and the words "and no more than 100 square feet in area" were added to the proposed town code language, and the words "and docking" were added in 2 other places, just to be crystal clear that boats also dock in the harbor. Other than that, the proposed change to the town code is no different than we presented at the public hearing way back in December. So I'd like to, folks have had even more time to look at the rules and procedures. I'd wanted to open it up for any commissioners who have any questions, comments, or thoughts about the rules and procedures, the related fee table for fees, and the proposal to the RTM for syncing up the town code with the plan and the rules and procedures.
Commissioners, any questions, any thoughts? Any reactions? Is that positive? Is that negative? Are we ready to vote on the rules and procedures?
Kim, this is Mark. I for one am ready to vote on the rules and procedures.
Okay.
Kim, this is Sam Cargill. I think that we're ready to vote.
Okay. So
when I say we are ready, I am. I'm not speaking for the group, but it's been an exhaustive process. I think the due diligence and the public comment, as well as the major constituents from the town, I think it was a collaborative effort, so I think we're ready. I'm ready, again, not speaking for the group.
Okay, thank you, Sam. So could we, if I'm not hearing from, are there any commissioners who are uncomfortable, who would rather not vote, who need another month to take a look at the proposals?
This is Eric. I'll be prepared to vote.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Okay, so if without hearing I'm not hearing anyone who says that they need more time, can I have a motion?
Kim, can I make the motion? I'd like to propose that we approve the proposed updates to the rules and procedures,
right,
and the update to the proposed town code language to be presented by the Commission to the RTM. This would be the version that has been dated April 19th, 2021, and the April 19th, 2021 mooring tackle, maintenance charges, and mooring permit fees table. So those 3 documents to be approved together.
So it would be the proposed rules and procedures would be the first document. The second
distributed yesterday.
Right. The second document is the proposed amendments dated April 19. Proposed amendments to the Fairfield Town Code, Chapter 24.
Correct.
that was distributed to the commissioners on April 19. And then the third document is the Southport mooring permit fees and mooring tackle maintenance charges that was sent to the commissioners on April 19th and is dated April 19th.
Right.
So we have three documents, commissioners, that Jack has proposed we approve this evening.
So I'm making that as a motion.
Yes. Can I have a second?
So, Kim, if I'm not muted, I'll second. This is Mark.
Thank you, Mark. You were not muted. We heard.
Good.
Mark seconded. And again, the motion is to approve the rules and procedures that are dated May 13, 2021, which were distributed yesterday. The April 19 dated and distributed Southport Harbor mooring permit fees and mooring tackle maintenance charges document. And the third is the April 19 distribution and dated Town of Fairfield Code proposed amendments to Chapter 24. So those are the three documents that Jack has proposed that we approve this evening, and Mark has seconded. Can I have all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Any opposed? Great. So that passes unanimously. Thank you. And thank you, Jack and Ed and Pat Carroll, who I hope is listening, for all your incredible hard work and thoroughness and these rules and procedures and the amendments will not be effective until December 31st or January 1st, 2022. So that's great. Ted, budget request.
Yes, Kim, and I think this is going to be fairly easy tonight, since the update for the budget request is really that there is no update for the budget request. We were asked to participate in the RTM's May 3rd WebEx meeting in case the RTM had any questions for us. So we did that. We participated, but the RTM did not have any questions for us or for any of the other commissions, for that matter. So the budget that the RTM approved had our budget in there, and I believe that our budget request of $23,162, which is unchanged from last year, was approved.
Great.
And that is really the update. Any questions?
Commissioners, any questions for Ted? Well, Ted, I would like to say thank you for
just a comment.
That go ahead, Sam.
I don't know if any of you listened to the final budget call and the vote, but there was quite a few objections to certain line items. So I'm glad that we got through and through the process. So I only want to add that for anyone and former RTM members on this call.
Thank you, Sam. And Ted, thank you for participating in that. And I know you had to spend some time observing and listening, and I'm grateful that you were able to do that. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Kim, and I'm glad that we were able to get our budget approved without any pushback.
Yes, that is indeed good news, especially in these times. So our final agenda item this evening is the Aquarian's application to divert water. There was a public hearing that Jeff and I attended on May 4th, and then there was an evidentiary hearing on May 6th. And I will say that my contribution was only to give Jeff my allotted 3 minutes so that he could represent us all, as he usually does, well and articulately in this hearing. And so, Jeff, please take it away.
Well, thank you. Am I muted, Kim, or can you hear me?
No, you're on.
Oh, good. Or maybe not so good because I'll be talking a lot, and I'm sorry to be talking a lot. This is very interesting. This proposal. I say interesting because it's not familiar to most of us. Water supply and water diversion, and so it certainly could be argued that this doesn't affect directly Southport Harbor. But in effect it does, because it affects the watershed that the harbor is part of. And I think the hearing officer, I know she did, recognize that the commission has a special standing in this matter. And that's why she extended the comment period to allow the discussion at this meeting. So as you know, the Aquarian Water Company is seeking approval from DEEP for I guess it's called a diversion of water permit, and that it would allow them to transfer up to, and I'm reading this, 14.2 million gallons per day from their greater Bridgeport system of water supply to the Southwest system, which is Greenwich, Stamford, New Canaan, and Darien. And currently they're allowed to transfer up to 7.25 million. So it's almost 7 million gallons a day additional water that would be transferred out of the Bridgeport system. And not to, sorry to prolong you, but when you look into the systems of reservoirs, the Saugatuck and the Aspetuck and the Easton and the Hemlocks Reservoir, the history is very interesting, going back to the early 1900s. Including when P.T. Barnum was the second president of the Bridgeport Hydraulic Company, and they developed some of these reservoirs. But what we're concerned about is the Hemlocks Reservoir, which was created to dam to supply water to Bridgeport, but it dammed Cricker Brook, which flows to Sant Mortar Lake, and then in that regard into the Mill River and downstream. So that since August of 2020, when DEEP convened an informational meeting to try to inform people about what was going on, it's progressed through an informational hearing in January of this year, a pre-hearing conference in April, and prior to that was a February status conference, which was after the town filed a petition for intervening. I say the town, the Conservation Commission, as a legal, I don't want to say aggrieved party, but affected party in the whole thing. And then subsequent to that, the Mill River Wetlands Committee, the Fair Plan Group, and the Lake Hills Group, which manages the Sant Mortar Lake, also filed. So it's gone through this process. It included a site visit on April 22nd. Now, Kim was not able to go to that. I did, and some of the photographs that I took I put into the attachments in the handout for you. And interestingly, we weren't allowed to photograph the dam or the spillway directly because of their security concerns. We could only photograph away from the dam downstream. And then I do have some aerial photos that I included. Don't believe Aquarian controls the airspace over the reservoir. But anyway, so it's quite interesting. And of course, the concern is what effect will this diversion have on aquatic resources downstream in Cricker Brook and in the Mill River, which flows into Southport Harbor. And I've again, sorry for stumbling through this, but I have some thoughts and some suggestions as to as to how we might proceed. And I also say in the beginning, back in 2018, Aquarian had a proposal, and I was involved in reviewing it for another town, although I don't know anything about hydraulics. This was the Harbor Commission in Norwalk was concerned about it. Aquarian had a proposal to withdraw water from the Cannondale wells in Wilton, which is the Norwalk River aquifer. And at that time, Aquarian made this statement, that the Cannondale well production, as they proposed, will reduce withdrawals from the Hemlocks reservoir system, improving drought resiliency and Aquarian's ability to maintain future reservoir releases in compliance with the Connecticut DEP's stream flow standards. So that seemed to indicate that they were concerned about withdrawals from the Hemlocks system in the future, and that with this 2018 proposal in Wilton, there was no mention of the Hemlocks proposal. They withdrew the Wilton proposal in the face of opposition to it by Wilton, and then it certainly seemed as if that the Hemlocks proposal was Plan B, although Aquarian says no, that they had planned to do that anyway. But now they're saying that there are no downstream impacts as a result of their proposal for this withdrawal. And it's very, very interesting because in the post-hearing comments, they acknowledged that the application affects AFFECTS, the Cricker Brook downstream of the dam, and the Mill River downstream of Cricker Brook, so that they acknowledge that their proposal affects those streams, but they include no information about environmental conditions in those streams. And in fact, they acknowledge that they didn't, in the application, that they haven't developed any information on downstream conditions because they say that there will be no impact. So it logically, one can question, how do you know in the future that there will be no impact if you don't know what the conditions are now? And I think that's one point. So I think that one comment to consider as providing to DEEP is that the application is incomplete because it doesn't include enough information on downstream conditions, so it's not possible to judge if there are adverse impacts in the future. The other thing that's interesting, the hearing officer has said that the burden of proof on identifying and determining if there are adverse impacts of this proposal rests not with the applicant, Aquarian, but with the concerned parties. And I can say, well, it doesn't matter what I say, but it just seems that's a flaw in the regulatory process for considering water diversions. And the other, so I'm just going through that's another potential possible conflict to make. They've also asked for a 25-year period for the permit. And in arguing for that, they're saying that period of time is necessary to justify the economic investment in the infrastructure to transfer the water. However, DEEP, in its other environmental programs, such as the coastal programs, always makes a point of saying it's not their concern what it costs for the applicant. They're only concerned with the environmental impact. So that seems to be inconsistent with how they implement other regulatory programs. But I think you could also make the argument that condition, that 25-year permit condition, is too long, is excessive, especially given there was a number of comments that had to do with the effects of climate change on drought conditions and water supply. And so there's many unknowns in the next 25 years. How would you know which, so if Aquarian is so certain that there are no adverse impacts from their proposal, what would be wrong with recommending a shorter period of time for the permit? Now Senator Huang, representing Fairfield, he convened quite a good discussion, I thought, of interested groups and experts in all this, and he submitted recommendations that the permit period be much less than 25 years. There's also no downstream monitoring gauge in the Mill River or creek or brook that could actually be used to measure stream flow downstream of the dam. So another recommendation could be that Aquarian should pay for the reinstallation of a gauge that was previously maintained by the USGS, I believe, at Duck Farm Road. So that's another possible recommendation to make. And then there was a 2007. We talked about this agreement between Aquarian and the town, and that was done outside of the regulatory process. But the town used leverage against Aquarian at that time to agree to the permit if Aquarian would agree to enter into a written agreement with the town that whereby Aquarian would release a certain amount of water downstream to mitigate potential adverse environmental impacts caused by the proposed water diversion at that time to go to Ridgefield. Now, we've asked why that similar agreement couldn't be made now, and Aquarian's response is that was then, this is now. Well, I'm sort of paraphrasing, but that the town doesn't have any special standing above the general public. So excuse me for talking so much. I thought that these, I raised them as suggestions for you to consider. These comments and recommendations that I just talked about, I would suggest are appropriate to include in a letter to DEEP about this. And I think, as I said, one would be that the application, because it doesn't have environmental information downstream, is incomplete, and the hearing officer shouldn't issue the permit until Aquarian provides additional information. And that the process itself needs to be reviewed and perhaps adjusted to better protect the public interest in the water, because the burden of proof is not on the applicant but on people who are interested. That the permit should be less than 25 years, and that there should be a reinstallation of a stream flow gauge, and that I don't know that we're going to have any luck in this, but we'd still recommend, based on the principle that was established or the precedent in 2007, that there be a written agreement between Aquarian and the town concerning the understandings that this won't have adverse impacts and that it will continue to be monitored, and that there will be releases to mitigate adverse impacts. But sorry for talking so much, but that's, I guess I've talked myself out. That's my contribution for this evening, maybe.
Well, Jeff, thank you. And the presentation that you put together for us with the pictures that's embedded in the agenda is just, I mean, I don't know about other commissioners, but I wasn't quite sure of the connection. But your pictures make it crystal clear that water that doesn't come downstream to the Mill River. The Mill River and the reservoir are definitely connected.
And it's also, it's not quite the same, but we're applying for the permit to dredge the lower wharf. We have to assess the resources that are potentially affected, and then someone has to make a judgment whether our proposal is going to adversely affect those resources. Right. Aquarian hasn't done that. I mean, I'm layperson in this thing. I'm not an engineer, but they've clearly acknowledged that their application affects Cricker Brook and the Mill River, but does not include any information on hydraulic or environmental conditions in the Cricker Brook or the Mill River, and that no information of that sort was assembled in the course of preparing the application. Now, their argument, of course, is that they control the amount of water that comes through the dam, through that discharge pipe, and that they can meet the state stream flow requirements. But I just feel that, from what little bit that I've learned about this, is that there seems to be a flaw in the review process, and that those comments that I suggested seem to be reasonable to make. I mean, we're making them in good faith. We're not trying to, disrupt a public, a public purpose supplying drinking water. And there were very good comments made by representatives of the Mill River Group and Fair Plan and other concerned citizens, including if it's hard to pursue conservation of water if the water supply is always, such as it is, that meets all. Well, they have to have a margin of safety, of course, but it's anyway. I think that, and as we said, that we're making these comments in an effort to be good stewards. The water belongs to everybody. It doesn't belong to the utility company. They have a charter from the state to sell it for public purposes, but it's a public resource, and we certainly have a standing to make comments and recommendations.
Well, I think your suggestions, your five ideas here are pretty powerful, and certainly not out of line with what we heard from people who have more expertise, the Mill River people and the Trout Unlimited people and the Rivers Alliance people. Everybody seems to agree that with many of the things that you've said, and some of them, I'm sure would agree with the things that they themselves haven't mentioned in those hearings and those proceedings. I for one think that we should let the hearing officer know that we are concerned and that these are our concerns, and we hope that she will take them into consideration before she makes a decision. I don't know how the other commissioners feel. I'm not sure if anyone else has had a chance to review any of the proceedings, but even if you haven't, surely you must have an opinion about 7 million additional gallons a day disappearing from our reservoirs and heading southwest.
So, this is Mark. Jeff,
yep.
You were talking about some of the information they don't have. Are they sharing the changes in discharge volume into the river? Because the MGD talk about transfer from the reservoir, right? So do they have graphs or data as to the change in flow that could some of which that doesn't evaporate or infiltrate, end up in South Pearl Harbor? Yes,
somewhere, but they're saying I don't mean to sound dismissive, but that it's not relevant because they control to a large extent the water that comes into the creek or brook through the pipe. And in other words, there's plenty of water in the reservoir. They can always keep providing the same level of water that's necessary to meet the DEP stream flow requirements. There's also the spillway. The water goes over the spillway at certain times of the year, so that's an additional source of the water. But what was interesting in the discussion in the evidentiary hearing, when the attorney for the town asked these questions about the extent to which they've evaluated downstream conditions, the attorney for Eversource, which is the Eversource attorney representing Aquarian, said that's not relevant. That in order to have any of these discussions relevant, the person making the argument has to demonstrate that there is going to be an adverse environmental impact, and nobody can do that right now. You know what I mean? We can't point to say that because there's no data, and you don't know what's going to happen in the future. So yeah, they have all sorts of charts and graphs, and another thing that they have charts and graphs about is demand, projected demand of water consumption into the future. And in the hearing, the attorney for Mill River and Fair Plan argued that those projections, and I think I'm saying this correctly, are confusing and she questioned them. And the hearing officer ruled that that's irrelevant for this discussion. The only relevant topics are whether we can show that there are going to be adverse impacts of this proposal. And I think it's right to say that we can't right now. But I think that how would you know in the future if you don't have a way of monitoring downstream and you don't have information on what the conditions are now? And when the DEP person was asked about this, they asked him, how will you determine? They said, well, we can always modify the permit if we see that there's a problem. And they asked him, well, how will you do that? And he said, we'll use professional judgment. So I can't point to a chart, Mark, or I mean, there are in their materials, but they're basically saying there are no impacts, and therefore it's not necessary to evaluate what's going on downstream. I'm sorry for the long answer to that. And again, even if there were, I don't know that we're the engineers that can evaluate all this stuff. We'd just be pointing out the concerns that we have. But the 25 years seems excessive.
Commissioners, other thoughts? Other questions? Should we proceed with letting the hearing officer know of our concerns?
Kim, it's Jack. I would be in favor of sending the letter to the hearing officer to include all the items that Jeff has proposed.
Okay.
Kim, it's Ted. I would too. Okay. I would also be in favor of what Jack just outlined.
Okay. So do we want to do this in the form of a motion? Do we have other commissioners who would like to weigh in?
So, Kim, what are the next steps? Would Jeff propose a letter, draft a letter, and then you would finalize it? Is that the step?
We have to. If we are to comment to the hearing officer, she has to have a letter by Friday, because the public comment period was closed on Saturday, but she extended it till the end of the week for our comments.
And do we have a draft letter yet?
Just the comments and an outline of it.
So Jeff, you have an outline, right? How many is it itemized? How many? I heard what you had to say, but yours is probably the expanded version. How many items were there?
Well, I got my notes on the page, Mark, are all over the place.
I have 5.
I can go back.
So just for those of us with short-term memory issues, maybe Kim, what do you have for the 5 issues?
That first of all, that we should suggest to the hearing officer that Aquarian's application is incomplete because they've provided no environmental data and no data on impact. That the regulatory process may be flawed because the burden of proof doesn't rest with the applicant. The burden of proof rests with the rest of us, for those who oppose the application. The third one, basically, that the request for 25 years for the permit seems to be inappropriate because there are too many in our time of climate change. There are too many unknowns going forward, and how do you know if something changes and there's no data? It's going to be difficult to show that there's any kind of adverse impact in the next 25 years. We would like to have some of the gauges reactivated. For example, the one on Duck Farm Road is there, but it's not running, it's not working. And that we would, why is, the fifth one is, why is the agreement between the town of Fairfield and Aquarian in 2007 that required Aquarian to release extra water, why is that not a precedent for this permit this time as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was the recommendation that we previously the Commission previously provided back in January of this year. So it's reiterating our previous concerns plus those additional concerns.
Having heard the short version, is the gauges on Duck Farm, is that a little is that more specific than we want to be? Is it more specific than the other items? Should we just stick with our feeling that information should be collected and shared?
Right. I think we would say that the Duck Farm was my example, but I think that we would like to have some gauges reactivated. That's not the only one that have been turned off. We'd like to have some gauges reactivated, or perhaps new ones installed, but some way to gauge what the downstream, if there is a downstream impact, and if there is, what is it from the as a result of the diversion.
Okay. So having heard that, Kim, I trust you and Jeff to draft and you to prepare a letter this week in following of Jack's motion.
Okay. Other commissioners, are we on board? Should we proceed? Do we have a motion here? Should we make this in the form of a motion?
I thought Jack had already made one, no?
Is that a motion? Jack, are you comfortable with that as a motion?
Sure. We just need a second.
Okay. And Ted, are you comfortable with that as a second?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So we have Jack's motion to prepare a letter that would incorporate these 5 items to be sent to the hearing officer before Friday in the Aquarian diversion permit matter. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Okay,
Kim, do we have a second on that motion? I have Jack.
Yes, Ted. Yes, Betty. Ted seconded. Jack moved.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone opposed? Great. Thank you, everyone. Is there any new business anybody wants to bring to the commission? Okay. With that being said, I need a motion to adjourn until our next meeting, which is June 15th.
Hi, Sam Cargill, ready to make a motion to adjourn.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Could I have a second?
Ready to do something else.
Yeah, sounds like it. Could I have a second?
It's Jack.
My next board meeting. We have one more.
Jack.
Betty,
Jack
will second that.
Okay. Thank you, Jack. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. We are adjourned until June 15th. Thank you, everyone, and I will put that race proposal in the email to all of you this evening. Take care.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Stay safe.